Greetings everyone, this is SuperAnchors, and welcome to this new episode of 40k Lore for Newcomers. For this episode, nominated on Patreon by Grim, we will be taking a brief look at the Space Wolves chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. This video will be a brief overview for certain events that may be explored in greater depth within additional videos within the future. So without further ado, let's begin.
Here I am, and here I shall die.
The Space Wolves are a loyalist chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, created during the course of the First Founding, having originally been created as the 6th Legion of the Legiones Astartes. Like all Space Marines, each and every battle brother of the Space Wolves is a genetically enhanced transhuman super soldier, boasting a size, strength, speed, toughness, and reflexes that are greatly surpassing those of a typical baseline human. The Space Wolves are a chapter whose warriors are famed throughout the Imperium for their unrelenting ferocity in combat, with few foes being able to withstand the sheer savagery of such warriors. While the chapter may initially appear to be little more than uncouth barbarians drunkenly spoiling for a fight, few can deny the fact that the Space Wolves stand amongst the Imperium's greatest warriors, claiming countless notable victories in the name of the Emperor. While the Space Wolves are a proud and noble defender of the Imperium, they are also known for being both incredibly stubborn and fiercely independent, resulting in the chapter coming into conflict with a number of Imperial authorities, in particular members of the Inquisition, as well as the religious body known as the Adeptus Ministorum, on more than one occasion. Indeed, it is said that only 2 individuals within the entire galaxy can truly bring the Space Wolves to heel: their Primarch Leman Russ and the Emperor of Mankind, who is known to the chapter by the honorific title of Allfather. Despite being as wild and untamed as the storms that sweep across their homeworld of Fenris, the Space Wolves will nevertheless lend their aid to any who require it, and woe betide those who are foolish enough to stand in their way.
The Space Wolves revere the Emperor as the greatest warrior of all time, the only being to have ever bested Leman Russ in hand-to-hand combat. When Space Wolves call upon Russ or the Emperor in battle, it is to witness the deeds of men and to judge the fallen.
The Space Wolves were created by the Emperor with the intention of being the 6th Space Marine Legion, although they, alongside the 18th and 20th Legions, would have had their origins and foundings during the Terran Unification Wars, obscured by a veil of total secrecy. While the reason behind this obfuscation remains unclear, some have speculated that such a policy was implemented in order to protect these legions from potential acts of sabotage or espionage. Others, however, have suggested that the Emperor himself segregated these 3 legions in particular to subject their gene seed stocks to additional modifications and augmentations. While the Space Wolves are known by a variety of unofficial titles and designations prior to the reunion with their Primarch, such as the Rout, the original name bestowed to the 6th Legion currently remains unlisted within Imperial records, and it appears that there never was one to begin with. While many of the other Space Marine legions would take part in the events of the Terran Unification Wars and the subsequent conquest of the Sol System, the 6th Legion would find itself being kept almost entirely in reserve and away from the fighting. The Legion would not participate within any major battles until roughly 10 years after the onset of the Great Crusade, which would see the Legion serving as part of the Crusade's first expeditionary fleet, which was led by none other than the Emperor himself. It was during the Legion's first major battle upon the world of Delsvan, and in particular the subsequent massacre within the capital city of Manasor Kor, where the 6th Legion would begin gaining notoriety for their aggression and brutality, in addition to a severe lack of discipline when compared to the other legions. This would even result in a number of instances where the Legion's warriors would callously butcher civilians and other such non-combatants in the field, which in turn would force Legion Command to institute what would become known as the Consul Opsicari, specialist officers tasked with maintaining discipline and order within the Legion's ranks, even if doing so necessitated the summary battlefield execution of unruly legionaries. Regardless, the Legion would continue to rack up victory after victory during the course of the Great Crusade, often being entrusted with eliminating pockets of stiff enemy resistance, in addition to being tasked with repressing any uprisings and rebellions that emerged upon those worlds that had been previously brought into compliance. The 6th Legion would in time become reunited with their Primarch, Leman Russ, when the forces of the Great Crusade reached the death world of Fenris. Russ, who at this point was just the second of the Emperor's gene sons to be officially rediscovered by the Imperium, was granted command of the 6th Legion, while Fenris would be claimed by the Legion as their new homeworld and base of operations. It is notable that the Legion was not at this point officially renamed. Russ told them to know themselves as the wolves that stalk the stars, while they themselves would typically refer to the Legion as the Vilka Fenrika, or Wolves of Fenris in the tongue of that world. The name Space Wolves is a popular one, but one that has only ever been scoffed at by the Legion and later Chapter as one born of outsider misunderstanding, albeit a misunderstanding the Wolves have no interest in changing. Under the command of their Primarch, the Space Wolves would continue to reap an impressive tally of victories in the Emperor's name, although they would sustain heavy casualties during the course of the Wheel of Fire campaign, resulting in over a third of the Legion's warriors, including the majority of their Terran recruits, being lost. Sometime after this, the Space Wolves would conduct a xenocidal campaign against a race known as the Noman. Following the culmination of this campaign, which saw the Legion launching a full-scale assault upon the world of Nova Borrelia, the Space Wolves would uncover a long-lost standard template construct, a device that contained within it the schematics and blueprints of technology long thought to have been lost to humanity. This STC in particular contained within it the schematics for an entirely new type of tank, one which would soon be mass-produced for the Imperial Army and come to be famed for their reliability and sheer firepower, the Leman Russ battle tank, named in honor of the Space Wolves and their Primarch. As the Great Crusade marched on, the Space Wolves would in time be involved in several altercations with a number of other Space Marine legions, such as the Night of the Wolf, which saw the Space Wolves briefly clash against the World Eaters Legion, the Battle of Shrike, which saw tensions boil over between the Wolves and the Thousand Suns, only to be calmed thanks to the intervention of Lorgar, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers Legion, and the Dulan campaign, which infamously culminated in a long drawn-out battle between Leman Russ and Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the Dark Angels Legion, which only came to an end after Russ was knocked out by his brother with a sucker punch. The Space Wolves were even rumored to have had a hand in the ultimate fate of the 2nd and 11th Primarchs and their legions, although whether such claims hold any merit of truth to them, none can truly say. But perhaps the most notable of these incidents would be the one that occurred just prior to the onset of the Horus Heresy proper, an act that would go on to have lasting repercussions for the Space Wolves Legion forevermore: the Burning of Prospero. When Magnus the Red, the Primarch of the Thousand Suns Legion, attempted to warn the Emperor that Horus, the Primarch of the Sons of Horus Legion and War Master of the Imperium, had turned traitor by sending an astral projection through the warp to Terra, his actions would not only see the Primarch violating the Edict of Nicaea, a decree that forbade the use of psychic powers and otherwise sorcerous abilities throughout the ranks of the Legiones Astartes, but would inadvertently cause catastrophic and irreparable damage to the Emperor's secret Webway project, allowing hordes of demonic entities to begin besieging the Terran Webway Gate. Angered by Magnus's actions, the Emperor would order for Leman Russ and his legion to travel to Prospero, the homeworld of the Thousand Suns, to bring Magnus back to Terra in chains to stand trial. However, Horus, still believed by the majority of Imperial forces to be a loyal servant of the Emperor, would intercept and alter Russ's orders, instructing his brother not to take Magnus prisoner, but to utterly destroy the Thousand Suns Legion. The Space Wolves, accompanied by a small contingent of warriors from the Sisters of Silence and Legio Custodes, as well as Titans from the Legio Mortis, soldiers from a number of Imperial Army regiments, and approximately 5,000 Astartes from the Sons of Horus Legion, would launch a full-scale invasion of Prospero, with the initial opening bombardment utterly devastating the world's capital city of Tizca. While the Thousand Suns would mount a fearsome defense of their homeworld, they would ultimately be unable to withstand the sheer feral ferocity of the wolves, and Magnus himself would have his spine shattered during his duel against Russ. But before the Wolf King could slay his brother, the remaining Thousand Suns would be spirited away to the demon world of Sortiarius, thanks to a ritual orchestrated by Magnus himself, with the aid of the Legion's chief librarian, Azek Aramen, with the resulting storm of magical energies appearing to rip the Thousand Suns Primarch to shreds, although Magnus himself would manage to survive his apparent destruction. It would later be revealed that the warriors of the Space Wolves' 13th Great Company, led by their Jarl Bolvi Greybeard, had mysteriously disappeared after pursuing their foes into an arcane maze that existed beyond the boundaries of time and space. It was shortly after the events that occurred upon Prospero that the Space Wolves would learn that the Horus Heresy had begun, as the Legion, which had sustained heavy casualties during the Burning of Prospero, would be ambushed by the forces of the Alpha Legion, forcing them to flee into the Alaxes Nebula. In desperation, Leman Russ would send a distress signal to Jagade Khan, the Primarch of the White Scars Legion for aid. However, the White Scars, who at this point in time remained oblivious to the growing civil war around them, had received word from Horus that it was in fact Russ and his wolves that had turned traitor, which in turn resulted in Russ's calls for aid remaining unanswered as the Khan sought to uncover the truth of such accusations for himself, though Jagade would ultimately determine that Horus, along with those that followed him, were the real traitors. During the ensuing battle within the nebula, the Space Wolves would manage to come close to total destruction, though the Space Wolves would manage to break through the Alpha Legion blockade and escape, thanks to the arrival of a contingent of Dark Angels led by Captain Ormond. Russ would then lead what remained of his legion back to the Imperial throne world of Terra, to both regroup and reinforce the world's defenses in preparation for Horus's inevitable assault. It was upon Terra that the Wolf King would set several plans in motion. The first of which would be to dispatch a number of squads, known as Watch Packs, to monitor the actions of his brothers so as to watch for any potential signs of treachery. The second, which he would orchestrate with the aid of Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra, would be to utilize the warriors of Malcador's Knights Errant to assassinate Horus and to end his rebellion with a swift, single action, although this later plan would ultimately end in failure. In time, Terra itself would become reinforced by the forces of the Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, and White Scars, each led by their respective Primarchs. It was after being reunited with his brothers Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius, and Jagade Khan that Russ would decide upon his next course of action, to launch an all-out assault against Horus's forces, so as to end the heresy before the traitor legions could even reach Terra. Dorn disagreed with this, attempting to dissuade Russ from undertaking such an act, pleading with his brother that his legion was needed to help reinforce Terra's defenses. Ignoring this, Russ, along with his legion, would choose to abandon Terra in order to hunt down Horus on their own, much to Dorn's frustration and anger. Before leaving, however, Russ would be gifted with the Dionysian Spear, a weapon forged by none other than the Emperor himself that would become known to later generations as the Spear of Russ, although the Wolf King would himself prove to be reluctant in accepting or using such a weapon. Thanks to the actions of the Knights Errant in their previous attempt to assassinate Horus, who had succeeded in planting a tracking device upon the War Master's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, the Space Wolves launched a surprise attack upon the Sons of Horus as they refueled and resupplied within the Trisolian system, catching the traitors completely unaware. Russ, along with a number of his warriors, would manage to board the Vengeful Spirit, and the Wolf King would face off against his traitorous brother in battle, inflicting a devastating wound upon him with the Dionysian Spear, although the Space Wolves would ultimately be forced to retreat as they were gradually overwhelmed, with Russ himself sustaining a number of injuries during the course of the battle. With the Space Wolves utterly decimated during the battle, the few surviving elements of the Legion would flee towards the world of Yarant III, whilst being pursued by a contingent of Traitor Legion forces led by the Sons of Horus, First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon. It was as the Space Wolves prepared to make their last stand against the traitors that they would be saved thanks to the timely arrival of forces from the Loyalist Ravenguard Legion, led by their Primarch Corvus Corax. With the aid of the Ravenguard, the Space Wolves would finally be able to escape their pursuers and regroup, though they would nonetheless prove too understrength to aid in the defense of Terra, with even Russ himself temporarily falling into a comatose state following his duel with Horus. In time, Russ, after recovering from his injuries, would lead the remainder of his legion back to Terra, although by the time the Wolves managed to reach the Sol System, the siege of Terra had finally come to an end, with Imperial forces proving victorious, at dire cost. Russ was distraught in his failure to aid in the world's defense, which would lead to him coming to blows with Lionel Johnson, who himself would also arrive upon Terra following the culmination of the battle. Sometime after the events of the Horus Heresy and the introduction of the Codex Astartes, a document penned by the Ultramarines Primarch Robute Guilliman, which saw the loyalist Space Marine surviving legions divided into smaller chapters, the Space Wolves would give rise to a single successor chapter, which would become known within official records as the Wolf Brothers. A few years later, during a great feast upon Fenris, Russ, after experiencing some kind of psychic vision, would gather the warriors of his retinue and set course for the warp space rift known as the Eye of Terror for unknown reasons. Although the youngest warrior of Russ's retinue, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, would be instructed to remain upon Fenris. After years of waiting for their Primarch to return, it would eventually be decided that Bjorn, as the last remaining member of the Primarch's entourage, would become the first Great Wolf, or Chapter Master of the Space Wolves. Bjorn's first decree as Great Wolf would be to declare the first Great Hunt, where the Space Wolves would seek to uncover the fate of their Gene Father. While many of these hunts over the millennia result in the Space Wolves recovering some great artifact, such as the very armor of Russ himself, the final fate of the Wolf King remains unknown, even to this day.
We may be few, and our enemies many, yet so long as there remains one of us still fighting, one who still rages in the name of justice and truth, then by the All-Father, the galaxy shall yet know hope.
Over the next 10,000 years, the Space Wolves would be involved in countless conflicts, many of them of great import, such as the Batalis campaign, the First War for Armageddon, and the halting of the infamous Red Wog. However, while the Space Wolves have fought countless battles against both Xenos and Traitors' forces, they have also come to blows against Imperial forces on multiple occasions, often due in part to the chapter's stubborn and fiercely independent nature. One of the more notable in this regard is that of the aptly named Fenris incident, or as it is known, the Incursion of Fools. In 886 M41, Leon Cherastes, a Cardinal Astra for the religious organization known as the Adeptus Ministorum, or Ecclesiarchy, would learn that the Space Wolves, along with the native population of Fenris, held religious and shamanistic beliefs that appeared to be in direct violation of the established imperial cult, which in turn meant the entire world could be, according to Cherastes, populated entirely by heretics. Cherastes would then lead a delegate fleet to the world to conduct an investigation regarding such claims and to determine whether or not the people of Fenris should burn for their crimes. As the ecclesiarchal fleet entered Fenrisian space, Cherastes would dispatch a number of his servants to the world's surface to begin their investigation, although their dropships would be shot down by the world's defenses after repeatedly ignoring the wolves' warnings. Enraged and believing that such an act was simply further proof of the chapter's crimes of heresy, Cherastes would leave the Fenris system, only to return at the head of a massive armada, which included no less than 3 orders militant of the Adeptus Sororitas, the military arm of the Ecclesiarchy. Over the next 3 weeks, the Ecclesiarchy would lay siege to Fenris, although the Space Wolves would prove a fierce and tenacious foe. The Wolves would utterly decimate Cherastes' forces, forcing them to withdraw from the system. Despite the damage the Ecclesiarchy were themselves able to inflict upon the Astartes, the Space Wolves would themselves view this conflict as a relatively petty one, treating it as little more than a minor inconvenience. While Cherastes' plan may have ended in failure, the Cardinal's hatred for those he considered to be heretics still burned within him. And so, for the next century or so, Cherastes would wage a shadow war against the Space Wolves. Having now adopted the moniker of Fulcrum, Cherastes would utilize a number of heavily augmented soldiers, known as the Fulcrum Hunters, to infiltrate the various ranks of the Astra Militarum regiments that had been dispatched to fight alongside the Space Wolves within various theaters of war, where they would be tasked with assassinating those Astartes whose names he had attained during the course of the Fenris incident, and thus take his revenge upon those who had, in his eyes, humiliated him. For a time, Cherastes' operatives would prove successful, as they would seek to isolate their prey before slaying them, before claiming that their deaths were simply due to the chaos of battle. However, higher-ups within the Ecclesiarchy would come to learn that Cherastes was using their resources to wage war upon the Space Wolves, which in turn would lead to a small civil war within the ranks of the Adeptus Ministorum, as the Church attempted to put an end to Cherastes' schemes. The former Cardinal's actions would also be uncovered by a squadron of space wolves, known as the Yarnhammer Pack, who would track down Chirastes to a facility upon the world of Ojata 7, which at the time was being assaulted by the forces of the traitor legions. The warriors of the Yarnhammer Pack would confront and ultimately slay Chirastes for his crimes before fleeing with one of his underlings as the facility around them began to crumble from an orbital bombardment orchestrated by Cardinal Axith Orkamond, who sought to prevent the forces of chaos from capturing Chirastes. Despite his death at the hands of the Space Wolves, Chirastes' agent had nonetheless managed to slay all but one of the Space Wolves who were confirmed to have taken part in his humiliation, leaving only one target left, a warrior by the name of Blackmane Thunderfist. However, the Yarnhammer Pack believed that this name given to them by the Cardinal's underling was in actuality a mistranslation, leading them to suspect that Chirastes had instead intended to assassinate Ragnar Blackmane, the Wolf Lord, or captain of one of the chapter's 12 great companies. Thankfully, however, the Yarnhammer Pack would manage to intercept and slay the remaining Fulcrum Hunters, and in doing so deny Chirastes his posthumous vengeance.
Fenris breeds heroes like a bar breeds drunks, loud, proud, and spoiling for a fight.
While a number of Space Marine chapters sport a chapter culture that is reminiscent to that of a Masonic order, with their warriors carrying themselves with a stoic dignity, the Space Wolves by contrast are noted to be loud, boisterous, and to the casual observer, barbaric. Indeed, the Space Wolves, when not training or upon the field of battle, are famed for their feasting and drinking like the Vikings of yore. While the physiology of Space Marines is capable of breaking down alcohol incredibly quickly, and thus normally incapable of rendering an Astartes intoxicated, the Space Wolves have developed a beverage known locally as Mewd, which is so incredibly potent that it is not only capable of getting a Space Marine drunk, but it would actively dissolve the internal organs of a regular baseline human, although weaker variants of this drink that are safe for human consumption are known to exist. This love of feasting, in addition to the chapter's love of battle, is a trait that is inherited from the tribal peoples of Fenris, from whom the Space Wolves draw their recruits from. As well as this, the chapter is noted to be fiercely independent, even to the point of regularly butting heads with imperial authorities, such as the Inquisition, which only the Wolves' status as being its first founding chapter protecting them from further censure in the majority of cases. The Space Wolves are, somewhat infamously, a Codex Deviant chapter, meaning that they do not follow the organizational structure laid out within the Codex Astartes that is utilized by the majority of Space Marine chapters. One of the more notable differences displayed by the Space Wolves when compared to other chapters is that the Space Wolves boast 12 great companies as opposed to the more traditional 10. While the Space Wolves did previously make use of 13 great companies during the course of the Great Crusade, the chapter would effectively decide to retire this particular company, due to the warriors of the 13th Great Company mysteriously vanishing sometime during the course of the Horus Heresy. Those warriors that are newly inducted into the ranks of the Space Wolves do not start off as a scout, as they would in other chapters, but will instead serve as assault troops known as Blood Claws, or become part of an assault intercessor squad, or an inceptor squad in the case of Primaris recruits, allowing these young neophytes to take advantage of their enthusiasm, aggression, and desire to prove their worth to their elders. Once their youthful exuberance has been tempered by both age and experience, these warriors will take their place within the ranks of a Grey Hunter squad, the chapter's equivalent to a tactical squad, or an intercessor squad in the case of Primaris Marines. However, some warriors will never outgrow this particular phase of their lives, and will remain as Blood Claws for their entire lives, often becoming inducted into a specialist Skyclaw jump squad or Swiftclaw bike squad as a result. As a Space Wolf ages, they will eventually take their place within the ranks of the Longfang squad, which serves as the chapter's equivalent to a Devastator squad. Some Space Wolves, however, typically those that display a more brooding or solitary nature, will often be uncomfortable with the boisterous camaraderie demonstrated within a typical Space Wolf pack, instead preferring to wander the wilds or the battlefield by themselves. These particular individuals, who will often be skilled veterans in their own right, will be removed from their squads in order to serve as scouts, answering directly to the chapter's Great Wolf. In a similar manner, those warriors who become the sole survivors of their particular squadron will more often than not remain alone, choosing to never again become part of a pack, becoming individuals known as lone wolves. The Space Wolves are known for having unique designations for their officers within their ranks, including Great Wolf for Chapter Master, Wolf Lord for Captain, Rune Priest for Librarian, and Iron Priest for Tech Marine. However, the chapter does not make use of separate chaplains or apothecaries, instead making use of specialist officers known as a Wolf Priest, which combines the role of both. It is these Wolf Priests who oversee the recruitment process for potential neophytes, as well as performing the Gene Seed implementation process, in addition to offering spiritual advice and counseling to their battle brothers. Prior to the events of the Ultima founding and the introduction of Primaris Marines, the Gene Seed of the Space Wolves was noted for being one of, if not the most unstable of all the first founding chapters. Indeed, following the events of the Horus Heresy, the Gene Seed of the Space Wolves would degenerate to such an extreme degree that the chapter would only give rise to a single successor chapter, known as the Wolf Brothers, before becoming incapable of being implanted within prospective aspirants that were not native descendants of Fenris, a trait which would lead in part to the extinction of the Wolf Brothers chapter. The Gene Seed of the Space Wolves would, over time, cause the chapter's warriors to develop hair that would turn gray and eventually white as snow, yellow eyes, constantly growing canine fangs, as well as granting them heightened senses and reflexes that surpass those of other Space Marine gene stocks. But perhaps the greatest and most dangerous flaw within the Gene Seed of the Space Wolves is that of the Curse of the Wolfen, which transforms those that succumb to it into little more than feral beasts that are monstrous amalgamation of man and wolf. While many of those that succumb to this curse will undergo a physical transformation, developing a number of bestial features such as snouts or claws, others will only experience the psychological effects of the curse, causing them to rip and tear through anything within their path before once again coming to their senses. Despite being unable to sire additional successor chapters for over 10,000 years, the advent of the Ultima founding has resulted in a number of Primaris chapters being created through the utilization of Space Wolves' gene stock, including the Wolf Spear and Icefang chapters. While these chapters would initially be met with skepticism by the Space Wolves, they would in time become to be accepted as true sons of Russ. And that concludes this edition of 40k Lore for Newcomers. If you like this video, consider supporting us on Patreon for more content. To those that are new to 40k, we hoped you learned something. So leave a comment below and thanks for watching.